Whistleblower Summit coming up very soon. Just tell our listeners about that.
Great. Thank you again. The Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights is one of the largest conferences of whistleblower, and it takes place every July 30th on Capitol Hill. And the reason we chose July 30th is that is actually National Whistleblower Appreciation Day. And where that comes from is that while the term whistleblower was really started to be used heavily in the 1970s around Watergate and some consumer protection stuff, the actual very first whistleblower protection law, or whistleblower law, was actually passed by the Continental Congress on July 30th, 1778. And so whistleblowing is really tied to the First Amendment.
And is whistleblowing something that started in the United States in the New World?
Well, there are whistleblowers. Whistleblowing is a global phenomenon. But I guess in the context that I'm discussing it, is that was the first whistleblower law in the United States. And I guess one of the other important laws is the False Claims Act. I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, which was passed on in 1862 during the Civil War, and it was signed by Abraham Lincoln.
And what can someone do if they're interested or want to attend in the Whistleblower Summit?
Oh, great. Yeah, the website for the Whistleblower Summit is www.whistleblowersummit.com. Whistleblower, singular, summit.com. And there you can get information. The schedule of events will be up there. Actually, this weekend coming up. Well, the schedule will be up there. Registration forms will be up there. All the information that you need, and we really welcome if you're interested in whistleblowing, if you're perhaps considering blowing the whistle, or if you need resources such as attorneys or even therapists. We have a wide variety of people come to the summit, and they support whistleblowers and good government.
And is there also a website that someone can look to for further information? About whistleblowing in general, even if they can't make it to the website.
I'm sorry?
Even if they cannot attend the summit, a place that has resources of information to help whistleblowers.
The Make It Safe Coalition, I think that's the MISC.org, is a network of whistleblower advocates and whistleblowers, and they're a resource, and actually MISC kind of forms the whistleblower community. And so there are hundreds of organizations, some small and some large organizations such as the National Whistleblower Center, Government Accountability Project, POGO, Project on Government Oversight. So they are resources for whistleblowers. I'd also recommend a couple of books. Stephen Cohen has one that's called the Whistleblower's Handbook, and Tom Devine has one called the Corporate Whistleblower Survival Guide, but it has good information for corporate and government whistleblowers.
And does what you've been saying apply to corporate whistleblowers as well, or do you have different advice for them?
It's generally the same. The thing about it is it's really wise to do as much research as possible in the particular area that you are. Like when you blow the whistle, for me, blowing the whistle at USDA is very different from someone blowing the whistle at NSA. Once you get into defense and national security, there are also other concerns when you're in law enforcement or any type of control and command and control environment. So that's one of the things that most people, they don't really understand, that between OSHA, Sarbanes-Oxley, there's a quilt, a patchwork quilt of different whistleblower laws and protections, and they operate very differently. So you want to get as much information as possible.
And if you can have a concern and you're in the corporate world, can you consult human resources? Try to consult the legal department? Who should you think about contacting there?
My recommendation would be to contact your own a private attorney. And the reason I say that is ultimately everyone you contact inside the corporation ultimately works for the corporation. So, in some of these, and I guess the other law that I was just mentioning a little while ago, Ken, the False Claims Act, that's actually a whistleblower bounty program. So what it was started because defense contractors were defrauding the government during the Civil War. And Abraham Lincoln decided to create a program where if citizens reported frauds on the government, they could receive a portion of the recovery that the government makes. So if I reported actually I did this, when I reported the $40 million that was being misappropriated at USDA under the False Claims Act, I could receive from 10 to 25% of the proceeds that the government recovers. So in that sense, if you're working in certain areas, certain industries, these can be sizable claims. Now, so I would recommend you start by consulting your own attorney.
Okay, and do some agencies or companies have independent counsel or inspector generals?
There's not so much of inspector generals in companies. Those are government offices. So that's a place to go. Within the government, and it's a mixed bag. I think the inspector generals they're generally speaking pretty good, but a lot of times, they fall under the federal bureaucracy as well.
Now, sometimes the consequences are not so good for whistleblowers. Tell us about that.
And most times the consequences are not too good for whistleblowers. Going back to the stat that I gave before, that the majority of whistleblowers actually come from the federal government. You'll see that a lot of the avenues within the administrative agency process, such as the EEOC, the Merit Systems Protection Board, when you start to look at the statistics on people winning those types of cases, they're extremely low. Ballpark around 2% of claimants actually win in those arenas. Now, of course, you're going to ask me why. The main reason I believe is that a lot of times they're designed so that at some point in time, a lot of whistleblowers will wind up facing the government pro se without counsel. These processes are designed so that you don't necessarily have to have counsel, but the reality is that without good counsel, a lot of claimants tend to be unsuccessful. Some people argue that the deck is stacked against them. Some people will say that without competent counsel or representation, you really don't stand a chance because the system is so complicated.
And do most whistleblowers come from the public sector, or you mentioned the government, but what about like the nonprofit sector?
Right. The nonprofit sector is the second largest pool of whistleblowers. And again, I think both of those can relate to the fact that you're working in an organization where you feel that there is a public interest. I mean, even if you're a nonprofit, you're working in a charitable organization, and so you're doing a public good. So a lot of times, what happens when people discover fraud in those scenarios, they feel conflicted, which is one of the things that causes them to blow the whistle, which is a little bit different from when you work in when you work in certain industries in the private sector. It's just make as much money as fast as you can.
And any other suggestions you have for someone who's thinking about blowing the whistle on why they should do it, and some of the reasons they may not want to do it?
Right. Well, my theory, Ken, is a lot of times most people I know wound up actually blowing the whistle, generally speaking, in self-defense. They wound up in a situation where they saw something wrong, they tried to fix it, and the management retaliation actually forced them into a situation where they had to file a formal complaint. And I tell people, a lot of this stuff is, you're dealing with, business ethics and corporate integrity. It's really strange, or it's unsettling to me that bad managers make good employees blow the whistle. And so that's something that really needs to be studied in business school and in management training.
So so someone should try to do it? Is there a certain time they should do it? Should they do it as soon as they see it? Should they see how it plays out? Should they see if anyone else is concerned or taking action about it?
Well, I think you should immediately seek counsel, independent counsel. And again, you've got two schools of thought. One is whether you do it anonymously. The other is whether you do something that's more public. Again, I think you're forewarned is forearmed, and so reading about some of the resources I just mentioned are are very important things for whistleblowers to consider. The other thing is this, Ken, is that when you blow the whistle, no one blows the whistle by themselves. When you blow the whistle, your whole family blows the whistle with you. So there's a lot of times where you need to have a really, as we say down south, a come to Jesus meeting with your family, your loved ones about what may actually happen. Again, when I blew the whistle, I lost my job, I lost business interests, I lost my fiance. And so that's something that you have to be prepared to deal with. And it's that type of isolation that a lot of times, really threatens whistleblower sanity. So there's another stat that's scary, and that's that 10% of whistleblowers actually commit suicide.
So it's something
it's not something to be taken lightly. Sometimes it's good to see a therapist.
Okay, we just have a moment or two left in the show, so it's good to marshal support if you can. Just tell us the titles to those two books again, and also about the Whistleblower Summit.
Sure. The Whistleblower Survival Guide by the Corporate Whistleblower Survival Guide by Tom Devine is an excellent resource, as well as the Whistleblower's Handbook by Stephen Cohen. And both of those people will be at the Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights on July 30th through August 1st in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. More information can be found at www.whistleblowersummit.com, whistleblowersummit.com.
Okay, I'd like to thank Michael McCray for being a guest on Law You Should Know and giving us this valuable information concerning whistleblowers, the good, the bad, and unfortunately the ugly. You're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nass Community College. If you missed any portion of this show, you can find a free podcast by searching WHPC on iTunes or on Spreaker, SPREAKER.com. Please join us next week for this at the same time for another program on Law You Should Know on 90.3 FM or over the internet at nccradio.org.